If you're not paying attention to preseason football, you're missing out on vital information that could win you your league. So here's my biggest takeaways from the first week of preseason action on the Fantasy First Down. I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. Today, I'm going to take you through my favorite winners and losers from the first week of preseason football. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them down below, or you can hit me up on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down or on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. Plus, if you'd like to join us in the FFD League, make sure you send me a message over on Instagram as well. You can also check out my full rankings at ffdfantasyfootball.com. Plus, if you need personalized rankings for your league, make sure you email me at benwasley23@gmail.com. Now, let's kick things off with the running back winners. I'm going to start things off with the Rams. And Kyron Williams has a new contract, while Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter are fighting it out for the backup role. It's clear from the first preseason game that Williams will be the clear lead back, as Sean McVay has always preferred to have a clear number one guy. That makes Williams a clear top 10 back for me, while Corum and Hunter, having played in the preseason, unusual for the Rams, are clearly in a slightly awkward position. RJ Harvey is likewise the clear early down back in Denver, with J.K. Dobbins set to take passing downs. This is a strange turn in events, given Dobbins has never even been considered a strong receiver, with only 330 of his 2,500 odd career yards coming through the air. This boosts Harvey's value while suggesting Dobbins is at best a handcuff. Bucky Irving will have a similar role to last year as well, with Rashad White likely a change of pace and sometimes receiving back. But White's groin injury this week could make Irving even more productive earlier in the season. He's right on the cusp of being a top 10 back. Tony Pollard will remain the lead back in the committee with Tyjae Spears, but may even do more than that early in the year, with Spears suffering a high ankle sprain and nobody of note waiting down the depth chart to take touches, unless for some reason you're interested in a late day 7 rookie in Khalil Mullings. Pollard's a great option to go to if you go wide receiver heavy early on. And if we're talking later picks, Keaton Mitchell is the clear backup to Derrick Henry and would likely have the same early down role as the King if Henry were to go down injured. Justice Hill appears to remain the third down back, but Mitchell has looked very good in the preseason, according to all reports, and I do think he's someone that is going to be one of the more valuable handcuffs this year, given Henry is another year older, and it's possible they want to get Mitchell involved anyway. Rookie Marion Hampton is the clear lead back with Najee Harris on the PUP list with an eye injury, with major question marks around his availability for week 1 and beyond. While OC Greg Roman has claimed another back will join Hampton in the backfield at all times, when the options are Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins, you have to assume Hampton will get enough touches to threaten top 12 fantasy production as long as Harris is out. But that's the problem. The reason I'm not willing to commit to Hampton earlier is that Harris will eventually return, and this likely returns to a committee situation of some sort, unless Hampton is absolutely amazing in the early weeks. And in another vet versus rookie situation, Ramondre Stevenson is clearly ahead of Antonio Gibson and has a chance to keep the early down role ahead of second-round rookie Travion Henderson. We know Henderson is an excellent receiving back, but it now looks possible that this is more of a committee than maybe some expected. This isn't a major issue for Henderson, who is already being drafted as a mid-rounder, but Stevenson now has some upside as a zero RB pickup who can help you early on in the season, at least until the potential of Henderson taking over the full role. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, try saying that 3 times quickly, has already emerged as the early down backup to Brian Robinson, with receiving back Austin Eckler backed up by Jeremy McNichols. It's unusual for a 7th round rookie to already be one injury away from a starting role, but it's even more valuable for fantasy when Robinson's play has disappointed of late, and Krosky-Merritt could at some stage win the role on merit, no pun intended. The Commander's early down role isn't exactly a fantasy goldmine, though, making JCM more of a dynasty stash than a redraft bench option at this stage. Now, for every winner, there's got to be some losers. And we've already talked about a couple, but there's plenty more big names that have fared very well this preseason so far. Week one has me very concerned about Brees Hall. The Jets have indicated for weeks that Braylon Allen would be receiving more carries this season. And now we also have to worry about Isaiah Davis being a potential third down back. Hall only took about half of the carries in the week one game while the starters were out there. This is a situation I'm keen to avoid, as all three of these players would need two injuries to really pay off for fantasy, given their current draft costs. I do think that Allen is someone you can still stash very late on if you're desperate, but Hall really scares me given his current cost and the potential that he will be in a full blown committee. He might be the clear cut starter, but he's already being drafted like that. And we know he's going to lose touches to Justin Fields. So I do feel like you've got to be very careful with Brees Hall now and only take him if he really falls in drafts. Meanwhile, over in Cincy, Samaje Perine will be the third down back for the Bengals, badly hurting Chase Brown's value. For me, he can't pay off at his current cost without playing on passing downs, and that is evidently highly unlikely. This shouldn't come as a surprise, as pass blocking has always been Brown's greatest weakness. He'll have some big games on the ground, but especially in PPR, he's a strong avoid for me as he's being taken way too early in drafts. Meanwhile, Caleb Johnson is in an ugly three-man committee with Jalen Warren and now Kenneth Gainwell. Johnson will be the early down banger, but that's not particularly valuable, especially when you've got Warren taking plenty of change of pace touches, and now Gainwell appears set to be the clear passing down back. Given Johnson's current mid-round cost, it seems unlikely he'll work his way into a league-winning every down role with so many cooks in the kitchen. The news isn't terrible for Chuba Hubbard, but it's not great, as he looks set to lose many passing downs and some early downs to Rico Dowdle. Hubbard is still a solid value given his draft cost isn't excessively high, but this certainly limits his upside and makes it hard to see him becoming a league winner. Meanwhile, Dowdle is a solid handcuff that you can pick up, use if you're desperate on a bye week, and obviously if there's a Hubbard injury, all of a sudden Dowdle becomes a running back 2 style player. Meanwhile, a rookie I've been seeing drafted as early as the 8th round, crazily enough, is Bashal Tutin. He's been getting a lot of buzz as a potential new starter for the Jaguars after being drafted in the 4th round this year. But he's not only played well behind both Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby so far this preseason, he was in a battle with 7th rounder LaQuint Allen for the backup role. This could easily change as the preseason goes on, but it does show that Tutin is being massively overdrafted in the middle rounds. After all, how valuable is the Jaguars starter really? Assuming it's not even a committee, which I think is a big stretch, the chance of Tootin being the main guy is pretty darn low at this stage. Now let's move on to wide receivers, winners and losers. And a big winner for me is a guy I've loved ever since the draft. Tetairoa McMillan is the clear wide receiver one in Carolina, likely supported by Xavier Legette in 2 wide receiver sets and Adam Thielen in the slot. Jalen Coker is still hanging around and could eventually take over from Thielen, but this is very much McMillan's team. This is great from a dynasty perspective, and he has been my second-ranked dynasty rookie ever since April. But I'm still unsure whether the Panthers can support a top fantasy receiver without the excessive volume we saw Thielen receive a couple of years ago. I think McMillan is a little overvalued given his lack of true upside this year in what should remain a low-volume passing offense. Meanwhile, Marvin Mims appears to be the clear Broncos wide receiver too, while Devon Vele and Troy Franklin are battling it out for the slot spot, and Pat Bryant, the rookie, is very much a backup at this early stage. This has been threatened for some time, and it's why I've consistently ranked Mims as a top 60 wide receiver this season. If he can just get on the field more often, he can be very explosive, and I expect he's going to have some very big weeks, and he's very valuable, particularly in best ball, where you can still get him pretty darn late. Now, I signaled this last week, but Travis Hunter's usage was exactly what we expected. He'll primarily be a slot receiver who plays in 3 wide receiver sets, but may eventually grow into 12 personnel groupings. The slot role in Liam Cohen's offense is highly valuable. After all, see Chris Godwin's wide receiver 2 per game finish last season. So there's a lot of fantasy upside for the two-way rookie if he can maintain this role. It is also notable that he was playing with the second team on defense, so it is possible they are going to focus on him as an offensive player this year, though that really does remain to be seen. It might switch around in the second week of preseason. Now, this isn't new news for anyone who's been watching this, and also Walter Football, where Walt's been talking about this for ages, ever since I've been on there. But the first preseason game has confirmed what we already knew. Dante Thornton is a starting receiver for the Raiders, while Jack Beck is at best the wide receiver 4. This could easily change, though, with Beck just needing to get past the underwhelming Trey Tucker, and there's still plenty of time for that to happen. Meanwhile, Thornton is an obvious late round redraft target, but the Raiders' wide receiver 2 is unlikely to have much value with Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty in town for me. For me, he's more of an intriguing dynasty stash, but it's not impossible to think he may get past Myers if his play continues to be particularly impressive. In a similar situation, the Bills' wide receiver room looks like it will be exactly as we expected entering the preseason. Khalil Shakir is the slot receiver after his excessive contract extension, though I still don't think he's a great player for fantasy, given he is a small guy with little upside. Meanwhile, Keon Coleman will be joined by deep threat Joshua Palmer on the outside, and Coleman still has the most potential to turn into the alpha receiver in this offense, and his preseason usage has only confirmed this. He's one of my favorite sleepers in line for a big second-year boost. Meanwhile, it seems like there will be mixed fortunes for the Texans' rookie receivers. Second rounder Jaden Higgins will join Nico Collins on the outside for Houston, while it seems Christian Kirk is ahead of third rounder Jalen Knoll in the battle for the slot, at least at this early stage. That could still change in the coming weeks, but regardless, Knoll is more of a dynasty stash, and Higgins needs a Collins injury if he's really going to pay off for fantasy at any point in the near future. While we have seen teams successfully feature 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers, this Texans offense looks nothing like the Bengals, Eagles, Vikings, or Dolphins rooms, where the third wide receiver is barely involved. Hence, I'm not overly interested in either rookie for redraft, but both are interesting dynasty stashes and could become valuable if there is a Collins injury, which, as we've seen in the past, is certainly possible. Now, for deeper leagues, Calvin Austin is the clear Steelers wide receiver 2, but Roman Wilson looks like he may have won the wide receiver 3 job over Robert Woods and company. Wilson's role isn't particularly appetizing in isolation, but with Austin not exactly a fantasy superstar or an NFL superstar, it's only a short jump to the number 2 position for the former day 2 pick who essentially redshirted his rookie campaign. I'm taking Wilson very late in some deeper drafts, and I still think he's a good dynasty stash. The Jets situation is equally murky with an experienced but not particularly good wide receiver 2 and some young guys pushing their way through. Josh Reynolds is the clear wide receiver 2. That much is for sure, as has been expected, frankly, for a couple of weeks now. But the wide receiver 3 spot appears to be an open competition between Tyler Johnson, who just seems to keep jumping around between clubs, Alan Lazard, who's still there despite no Aaron Rodgers, and Arian Smith, the rookie, who I like quite a lot. It's likely the third spot is some sort of committee initially, but the only receiver that really interests me among the 3 is the rookie Smith, and even then, only in Dynasty or Best Ball. He'd need to move past Reynolds to become fantasy relevant this year, especially with Justin Fields as the quarterback. Speaking of rookies, Isaac Teslar looked fantastic in the first game of the preseason, but he is still clearly behind Tim Patrick and potentially Khalif Raymond. The rookie is very much a developmental prospect, though, and someone I'm targeting in Dynasty for 2026 and beyond, especially if Jamison Williams leaves Detroit. And don't forget, we do know vets do tend to get starts early in the preseason. It's possible Tesla does go past Patrick, especially once the season starts. Plus, it's possible Raymond is just getting rested because he is one of their main return guys. This is certainly an area to watch. Meanwhile, let's talk some losers, some wide receiver losers. And a loser that I love personally is Trey Harris. He's been my favorite dynasty pickup this offseason, but the signing of Keenan Allen really tanks his redraft value this year. With Ladd McConkey and Quinton Johnston entrenched as starters, Harris would need an Allen injury or a surprise change in role to pay off for redraft. Meanwhile, Johnston is being chronically undervalued and is a solid late round pickup. Seems like people forget this was a former first round guy who can be explosive in this offense. And I know McConkey looked good last year, but Johnston is more of a classic alpha style guy who could be very good in fantasy. It will be hard this year with Allen also coming in, but Allen is another year older, and I do think that Johnston has the potential to pay off, certainly more so than Trey Harris does for this year. Another rookie being overvalued is Kyle Williams, who is a popular late round stash, but I wouldn't be considering him in redraft this year. Stephon Diggs and Demario Douglas are clear starters for the Patriots, while Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte, Mac Hollins, and Williams are all fighting it out for the third receiver spot. And Williams is clearly behind Bourne and Boutte in that fight as well. Plus, we know Hollins loves getting used around the end zone and also in run plays. While that may change as we move into the season, how much do you even want the Patriots wide receiver three anyway? Williams is at best a dynasty stash who could, though probably won't, emerge into the Patriots wide receiver one in the long term, particularly. Other rookies include the Titans' day three guys, Jameer DK and Alec Imanor, who are still clearly behind Tyler Lockett and Van Jefferson in the battle for starting roles in Tennessee. While this could be a veteran privilege, it would have been nice to see a little more usage for the rookies amongst the starters. Imanor is more likely of the two to win a starting role, given he just has to beat out Jefferson, while DK is more of a slot receiver and would need to get past Lockett, who's a slightly better player at this stage. I do think long term DK has more upside of the two, but for redraft, I'm just avoiding them both. And the rookie losses continue. Luther Burden played well behind Bears slot receiver Olamide Zacchaeus and appears some distance from the starting job. Burden has missed a lot of preseason. I expect him to bridge the gap at some stage, but it makes it very hard to justify drafting the rookie in redraft, even if his price drops below his bloated mid-round cost. He's just not looking like he's going to get anywhere near Zacchaeus before the start of the season, and I don't love stashing a guy whose upside is the Bears wide receiver three when they've got far better players in DJ Moore, Colston Loveland, Roma Dunze, and DeAndre Swift there already. And we also have another disappointing rookie, another day two guy in Ty Felton, who is behind not only Jalen Naylor, but also someone called Lucky Jackson in the battle to be JJ McCarthy's wide receiver three. And Jackson is a name that I've seen pop up on the end of their depth chart for a long time, but I've never seen him as the wide receiver four or even close to there. So that's saying bad things about Felton. While this role hasn't traditionally been particularly valuable, the Vikings wide receiver three role, Jordan Addison's impending suspension does mean the player who wins this job could be usable for a few weeks at least. I'm not totally giving up on Felton, especially in Dynasty. But if we don't see movement above at least Jackson in next week's game, I'm not touching him for redraft. And I think it's going to be Naylor that you can go to if you desperately need someone in the first few weeks of the season or whenever Addison gets his suspension. Meanwhile, Jalen Tolbert was the Cowboys' wide receiver two last season, making him a solid waiver wire pickup early last year. The arrival of George Pickens had already taken some serious gloss off his fantasy prospects, but it now appears they are officially matte and dead, with Cavonte Turpin being rested for the first preseason game, while Tolbert played with the likes of Jonathan Mingo. It's possible this shows Turpin's sewn up special teams role, but I think it's more likely to reflect the whispers of Turpin taking offensive snaps away from Tolbert. This is a situation to totally avoid behind the top two receivers. Meanwhile, the Cardinals are heading for a wide receiver 2-3 committee, with Zay Jones appearing likely to join Michael Wilson and last year's wide receiver 3 Greg Dortch in splitting wide receiver snaps behind number 1 Marvin Harrison Jr. With Trey McBride and James Conner also heavily involved in the low volume passing games, it seems none of the non-MHJ receivers will be fantasy relevant. Now let's talk tight ends, and we'll start with the winners. And Tyler Warren is clear every down tight end for the Colts and will be the starter from week 1. How much value this has will somewhat depend on the winner of a very open quarterback competition, but regardless, I think Warren is a cheap option who has some upside. I would, however, suggest drafting a second tight end option too, as the bust potential with Warren is real. Meanwhile, TJ Hawkinson suffered from a roughly 15% drop in routes run last year, which frustratingly impacted his fantasy value. But his preseason usage suggests a potential rebound with Johnny Munt now in Jacksonville. His draft cost makes him a bit of a bargain as, to me, he's a top 5 tight end this year, though I admit I do also love the value of David Njoku a couple of rounds later as well. Meanwhile, Josh Wiley's drop down the depth chart suggests Chig Okonkwo's late season boom last year may well continue into this season. With Gunnar Helm, the rather unthreatening tight end 2 at this stage, Okonkwo's role as the clear-cut starter appears to be finally locked up. This has rarely meant much for fantasy, but rookie quarterbacks do tend to rely on their tight ends more than veterans, and that could finally mean a coming-out party for Chig, especially with a weak wide receiver room. Better late than never, I guess. He's a viable late-round redraft pickup who I've loved for years now. Meanwhile, on the side of the losers, Evan Ingram appears likely to succumb to Jordan Payton's unhealthy love of Adam Troutman. The former State once again appears likely to steal early down snaps from a fantasy relevant tight end, with Ingram playing only 70% of the starter snaps in preseason week one. Admittedly, most of these missed snaps were running plays, but it's still a bad sign and further reason to avoid Ingram at his inflated price. Meanwhile, rookie star Elijah Arroyo was expected to be the main beneficiary of the Noah Fant release at the Seahawks, but it now seems like AJ Barner may be far more heavily involved than we would prefer, as he was left out of the game while Arroyo played plenty. A 2024 fourth round pick, Barner is an accomplished blocker who is also a solid receiver when called upon. This looks set to turn into an ugly committee situation rather than every down tight end role we had hoped Arroyo would slide into. The rookie's still a great dynasty stash, but until he improves his blocking, he's unlikely to be fantasy relevant. Speaking of a lack of fantasy relevance, and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox remain in an awkward tight end committee with no signs of that changing. Until Kincaid emerges as the clear starting tight end, he remains difficult to trust for fantasy, and I'm just plain avoiding him as much as I love the receiving talent. But things are even worse in LA with the Chargers tight end room a mess. I'm avoiding all of them as it's just totally unclear who's the tight end one between Tyler Conklin, Will Disley, and also the rookie Aronde Gadsden, who's the only one I'm really particularly interested in. But I'm still anticipating some sort of committee. In Dynasty, Gadsden's someone I'd pick up. He does have long-term potential to turn into a fantasy starter, but he's ultimately a day five guy whose blocking is pretty poor. Good receiver, and he may get some receiving work, especially on third downs and around the red zone, but I'm not particularly interested in him even in Dynasty this year, but certainly not in redraft. And that's all we've got for week one of the preseason. As always, a big thank you to a lot of the guys out there who do a great job of monitoring preseason snaps. Guys like PFF and also the guys at Walter Football help me out a lot with their stuff as well. So thanks to them. If you've got any questions, make sure you hit me up below or on my socials. And as always, please make sure you like and subscribe. Plus, if you need help on your drafts, I would love to make some personalized rankings for you. Just email me at benwasley23@gmail.com. And for a very affordable price, I'll put together some rankings that are specifically for your draft. Because let's face it, no one knows what draft settings you have online, and they are all set up for different things. So if you want to get some bargains on draft day and maybe win your league for the first time, make sure you hit me up either on Instagram or through email. I look forward to talking to you guys about preseason week 2 in the coming days.